There we
We
go.
are live now.
We are now
Sorry,
live. All right, it was like a little bit of a weird tech glitch there. So before we dive into the start of this episode, I'm going to share ChatGPT is chomping at the bit to ask this question that we will get to later in the episode. And the question, Nick, for you to keep thinking about as over the next 20 minutes while we're asking you all kinds of other questions is, what's the most absurd task someone has asked if AI could do, and did you secretly want to try it anyway? So we will come back to that question later. But Eric, why don't we hit the music? All right, I'm loving the cool new music. Long story that we won't go into, but anyway, we've got new music. It's very, very energetic. Well, I'm really excited to welcome Nick Pope to this episode entitled "The Adaptive Business: Growing with AI as It Evolves." Nick Pope is the Chief AI Officer for Train in Your Lane. He is also the AI Pope, and really is bringing AI thinking and AI capabilities to businesses all over New Hampshire and that area and up in New England. So, Nick, we love to always start off with the question, "What's on your mind?" So I'm going to ask you, what's on your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for being here. Really excited about it. Really happy to get to know both of you and be invited on this podcast. What's on my mind is I had this great conversation yesterday, and this gentleman told me this great story. I'm going to completely steal it. I told him I would. But it's really been rattling around in my brain since yesterday, which is the concept is, remember to feed the cat. Right. And so what he said was, his wife was out of town for the weekend, and he was going to be home alone, and she pretty much said, "Hey, just remember to feed the cat while you're here." So, okay, not a problem. Goes about his day. Through the morning, son gives him a call, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I got tickets to tonight's Celtics game. I got a hotel room comped. Like, we can go down. Not going to cost us anything. We can grab dinner. Like, it's going to be great. I'll come and pick you up in 15 minutes." And he's like, "Absolutely, yeah, let's do it." So picks him up. They're at the game. About 3/4 of the way through the game, he goes, "Oh my God, can't go out to dinner. I can't do any of this. Like, your mom asked me to feed the cat. I have to remember to feed the cat." Well, long story short, they definitely didn't go home. They spent the night. They had fun. He got back the next day. The wife got home, and she asked him, "Hey, did you remember to feed the cat?" Well, what did he say? "Yeah, absolutely. I remembered to feed the cat." And ultimately, the question is, did you feed the cat? And the context we were talking about this through was really around leveraging AI and him saying, like, I don't know if I'm really even asking the right question to get the right answer. And I thought it was just such a good tangent and such a good story on how do you really figure out, am I using this in the right way? So I thought it was really high sort of EQ on his part around, am I even asking the right question? So love the story. Are we asking the right questions in our lives with AI? I just loved it. It's been rattling around in my head ever since.
So there was an interesting. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll fight over it.
I was going to say that we can't get this right. All right, I'm going to go. So I saw this thing on line where somebody was sort of like, it was talking about the fact that if you over prompt, the AI will only use what you're plugging in, and then sort of you've kind of like manipulated it in a way that it's going to answer based on what you put in. And I thought that was an interesting, sort of what you were talking about. I thought it was an interesting phenomenon that actually that's the thing I like about AI, right? Like, we use it for marketing. Jeff and I use it in our business for marketing purposes. So we want to use what somebody else has brought in. When you want some expertise on something, so you want to narrow its scope, because without doing that, you're going to get what Jeff always refers to as the collective stupidity of the internet. And who wants that? But it's interesting that if your prompts can be, the right prompts can be a positive or a negative depending on your goal, or the prompt can be right or wrong depending on what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's Eric. It's sort of interesting. As you were talking about that, I was just thinking about this, idea of like, and picking Nick picking up on what you were saying, which is this idea that I think we are finger painting with AI right now, and we do not understand what an AI Rembrandt would even look like. And so right now we're just doing all these things that like we may be asking the wrong questions, or to your example, we may be prompting it in the right way or the wrong way given the circumstances. I think that's, it's sort of like, we've got this tool and everybody's kind of be like, how do I use this tool, right? And nobody's really figured out like what happens when you take this tool and combine it with other tools and do other cool things with it, and so forth. So, well, Nick, what are the biggest?
Nick,
Go ahead, Eric.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Nick, what are the biggest? I think there's like a little bit of a delay or something here that's causing me and Eric to just step all over each other. What is? And now I can't even remember my question. But I guess we're just
All right, I'm going to jump in then. How do you business proof how do you business proof, or how do you like sort of protect yourself as a business from this phenomenon?
How do you protect yourself as a business, right? I mean, I think the biggest thing is to actually understand what it is, right? And I love, Jeff, when you said we're sort of finger painting with it right now. It's sort of like when the smartphone first came out and everyone was just loading like web apps onto a phone before they understood the pinch and the pull and how you could use this device for so much more, right? And I think it's the same right now, Erica. I think a lot of people are still viewing this as almost like a Google replacement, that finger painting, right? I look at the sort of technology bridges that you normally have when you think about like Blockbuster, and then it turned into Netflix, and people can kind of understand that. And right now, there really isn't anything that generative AI had before it that really correlates. But most people are looking at it like Google, right? If I use ChatGPT like Google, it gives me better answers than Google, and I like it. And yay, I use AI. And that's just such a small percentage of it. And I think if you're looking at it as just another SaaS tool, as another thing I can buy and plug in, if you're just looking at it in these most simplest forms, it is the finger painting versions of it. So for me, sort of business, they need to really understand what it is. It's not just ChatGPT, which is the Kleenex of tissue paper, right? There's automation, and there's visuals, and there's coding and low code, no code. You can iterate on all of this. You can use it as a thought partner, right? Like there is so much more to it than this. So my biggest tip, and it's what my sort of why and mission on is, how do we educate people on what this truly is, help them see the forest through the trees? Because really understanding this technology, you'll understand that it touches everything in your business, and it's going to be changing everything, and it's not going away. It's not a tech fad. And honestly, you have to speak to it like a person. That's kind of what it's trained on, which isn't natural. So once you start figuring out these things, that's how you really understand how it's going to change your business, and you can stay on top of it. So there's no magic bullet. There's no one tool that you need to buy. It really is just understanding and a little bit of play. But how do you find time to do that when you're busy running a business? I think that's one of the biggest challenges out there.
Well, that's pretty cool, Nick. And while Eric and Jeff are fighting over you here, I want to actually go back to the cat. The cat, meaning the result and the impact and the conversation. And it kind of boils down or follows your discussion about how the business needs to adopt AI, right? The KPI. What are we measuring? Are we measuring how much faster we wrote that article or whatever it is, created that image? Or are we measuring really the business impact, AKA, did the cat get their dinner?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I want to talk about. How are businesses not measuring AI and how they should be measuring it strategically to make sure that the cat is well?
You're exactly right. And I think it really boils down to, it's so easy to pick out 1,000 KPIs that you can follow and match and track. And, how many of X did Y and what did that result in? I always recommend boiling it down to a key KPI, right? Like, what are we actually measuring? Is it revenue? Is it new client acquisition? Is it like trying not to have too many disparate KPIs that you can cherry pick from, that you can find that, right? Because you can massage any sort of data to show growth in these different KPIs. So, ultimately, I always like bringing it back to what are the primary goals for the business? What are your key business goals for the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? And let's tie it directly into that. I think one of the tricky parts that I run into as well, though, is really pinning down what that ROI is for that educational space. Because I think most of the bigger enterprise clients, they really do treat it like a SaaS rollout. And when they want to do work with us, it's, okay, well, what's the 90-day roadmap and what's the plan and what are we going to do and what are the KPIs and this and that? And I have to push back and say, like, this isn't really how this is going to work for you. I did that with plenty of businesses in 2024. None of them saw the ROI that they were looking at, right? Ultimately, taking a step back, getting everyone on the same page, removing the barriers. There's a good 8 to 10 of them that anyone in your workplace could have. Getting people on the same page, excited about it, those early productivity wins, then finding those areas of opportunity. And 9 times out of 10, the best areas of opportunity weren't the things that the executive suite thought they wanted. They usually bubble up internally for really low risk, high reward.
Yeah, I actually want to second you here. I think what you're bringing up, if I'm understanding it correctly, is you got to measure the AI tool itself and also the strategic work stream where it's operating. And if you permit for this duality, you actually are covering both bases. And as you go along, we're all learning, right? You learn how to actually merge them and measure it strategically. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, right? And I really look at, operations is my favorite part inside of a business. They're the keys to success with the majority of this AI. Also, HR is another big side of that fence as well. And I think when it comes to actually rolling out the specific tool, if they get AI and they're excited by it, I mean, show of hands, who here has ever seen an employee excited when they say, hey, we're rolling out a new CRM?
Right.
Like, no one, right? Like, and if that's how AI is rolled out at your company, best of luck. You're going to see very limited results on that. So I agree. Those two separate things. How can we measure sort of AI literacy and growth and usage and sharing? And how do you put in good governance that creates excitement and willingness to share? And how do you, as a leader, make sure that you're not punishing people when they bring up their great ideas, right? The first time someone says, I saved 8 hours by automating this workflow, and you say, here's 8 hours more of work, guess how many times they're going to bring that up again, right? Not a lot.
Right. This is Eric, and Eric has been playing around with, Eric's a coder, right? But he's been playing around with vibe coding and whatever. And it's like, he keeps telling me how he'll talk to his coder friends and they're like, wow, yeah, we just vibe coded. And then we spent more time debugging the vibe coded stuff than we would have write it in the first place.
Well, and it's not just that you spend more time debugging it. It's that, like, you don't know where to even start to debug it. Like, I got pretty far along on this thing that I was trying to vibe code, and I got to a point where it's like, oh, I got a little greedy. I was like, oh, can you fix this little tiny detail? And it fixes the detail in a way that breaks the whole thing, and I have absolutely no idea because I vibe coded.
We're losing you.
I have absolutely no idea how to go back and fix it. Go ahead.
No, sorry. We were just you're sort of, we're getting a little technical issues with you there, so you cutting in and out. So I think
Well, anyway, my point is that it doesn't get any it actually, you don't learn along with it, and so you don't have any context.
Which I think goes back to this point that I hear a lot of people talking about now, is like this idea of how do we stop thinking about how AI can do the things we do and start thinking about using it as a tool to enhance our ability to think, as opposed to outsourcing the thinking to it. Because the problem with outsourcing the thinking to it is you get stuff that's like almost good, right? But it doesn't really give you the thing that you need. Whereas you can actually really use it to pull stuff out of your brain that you didn't even realize was there. I think, Nick, you and I talked about this this prompt of, where you ask ChatGPT or whatever LLM you prefer. You say, can you interview me, asking me one question at a time, to help me, help gather the information from me that you would need to outline a marketing plan or whatever it is. And this prompt is so fascinating because I've used it, and it works really well, because it's not that it's thinking for me, it's actually getting me to think. And one of my favorite things was, at some point I sort of threw up my hands because it asked me some question. I'm like, I am completely lost here. I don't know what to say. And it actually said to me, it responded back to me, oh, let's try this a different way. And then it asked the question in a different way. And I actually came up with the answer that I was looking for. So it's just, it's fascinating to use it that way. But right now we're sort of thinking about it as like, oh, this could replace everyone, and it's, whatever. But the reality is, no, this could enhance everyone, is kind of the real value.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. It's one of those barriers I alluded to earlier, right? Like there's going to be people in your organization that are worried it's going to replace them, or that they're going to be automating away their jobs or something along those lines, right? And it's really, I love AI for in your area of genius, in your area of expertise. How do you augment yourself in that space, right? So I can't ask PhD level physics questions to get a PhD level physics answer, right? But in your field and area of expertise, what you can put into it, it will give you much better out in your area of expertise. And then again, to your point, acting as the thought leader, and it's the thought partner, not the other way around, is a big cognitive gap for, I think, a lot of people, where they say, hey, do this for me, or give me this, right? Versus, here's what I want to do. Here's what my thoughts are on it. Here's what the output is, all this context, all this good stuff. Help, and I think this gets back to the cat scenario, right? Ask me questions one at a time to help give me the best possible output for this. I do recommend setting like a barrier on that of like 3 to 5 questions, or else you could end up in like a 4-hour interview session where it runs out of context window and it forgets why it's asking questions. So you do have to be cognizant of some of those things, but a good 3 to 5 questions one at a time, because it allows it to build off of that, is the other tip, right? If you just say, give me 5 questions, it's not as powerful as that one at a time back and forth.
I think you should start a new LLM around this and call it Cat GPT. Sorry, I couldn't let that go.
I love it. I love it. It is, the first prompt is, did you remember to feed the cat? And then it all. I like it. I like it. It's strong.
So Jeff, this is how the Go gamers felt. Okay, they were just annihilated by the AI.
Right.
And on that subject, Nick, there is a point of enterprise AI, right? And how do we make sure that at scale, we don't feel like we just lost the game, right? We just didn't get cornered, but on the contrary, we created the workforce that works outside us, right? Parallel to us, that works with us. So what is your thinking on this subject?
I mean, it really starts at the top, and what your leadership and how they think about this, right? Like, is it a conscious capitalistic mindset, or is it a pure late stage capitalistic mindset? I think there's going to be people that use this.
Nick, let's differentiate between the conscious capitalistic and pure late stage. Elaborate on that.
So ones that feel like there is a moral and ethical, part of where capitalism and what makes it great. So am I going to take the route of Guinness when the steam engine came out and massively expand and use the power of my people to absolutely go out and get bigger? Or am I going to look at my Q3, Q4 numbers from my PE firm and figure out where I can chop labor in order to inflate my short-term numbers, right? I think it's a very short-term versus long-term gain. And I think it's abundantly clear, if you're in an organization or working for an organization for that, you should really be thinking about that over the next several years. But to me, it's really about right now, you would probably say in a standard workforce that really hasn't done a lot of AI transformation, that any of your employees, what percentage of their creative brain do they actually get to use in their week? Maybe 20% if you're lucky, right? You are sitting on an amazing capital of human genius that knows your company, that knows your culture, that knows your clients and your politics and your choke points, if you can free them up from that mundane admin work and allow them to be their area of genius and really think about, if I had 4 hours free in my day, what would I use that for that I really feel like I am designed for in this role at this company? Ask your employees that question and then find a way to give them that space, I think is really how you can sort of build out this future where you're leveraging AI for the right reasons and not for the wrong ones. That I think the companies that embrace that are going to see that exponential growth versus get caught up in the constant churning of, who can I cut and why? And then, we've seen plenty of those examples where like they cut what was it, Klarna? They cut thousands of people. And then like 6 months later, they were like, oh, wait, we're hiring people again because it actually turned out it's a terrible customer experience because these things aren't ready yet.
Yeah.
Interesting. When you were talking, I had this thought, just go rolling back a little bit. And what you were saying was, it's the human context window, if you will, or the sort of complexity of human context window that makes human different from AI, right? Because you can just plop in a bunch of stuff and there's just no complexity, right? It's just a bunch of stuff and then it has to kind of make sense out of it. And it does a pretty good job, most of the time. But like the point you were making about like, these are people who know your company. That's the human context window phenomenon that AI can't get. It's the same thing as my coding experience. It's like it only has the context window of whatever it did and in the order that it did it and whatever. And so eventually it just loses that. So how do you capitalize on the, at least currently, superior ability of humans to create the context window for what they're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean that's a massive question, right? It is definitely what's going to separate us for a while, right? It is our ability and the amazingness of our brain, and we barely understand how we do all of this and how do we sift through the information and how we store it and how do we pull that out, right? So I think as memory gets better for these models, as those context windows increase, as we figure out ways to better semantically search and store and pull from that information, it's going to get stronger. But yeah, and I think that ultimately, if I'm not going to get too like far down the Star Trek, futuristic model of like, I still think that individuality is going to be the ultimate currency, right? Like I talk to marketing companies and they're like, if everyone's using AI and using these tools, how are we going to stand out? How are we going to be different, right? Well, it's your style, it's your taste, it's your expertise, right? And that's for each of us, our story, our passage through time, our journey, our experiences. That is the unique flavor that will always give us a variable if we know how to use AI intelligently, that will give you that differentiator that is just not going to be able to replicate.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thought about how, it's like marketing has changed so much in the last 25 years because of the internet and smartphones, right? But we don't know how marketing is going to change going forward, and the ability to deal with people on a one-on-one basis actually creates a tremendous liability of how do I maintain a brand on a one-on-one basis. But before I'm going to leave you with that thought to think about, but I've got ChatGPT has been dying to jump in with its question right from before. So Nick, what is the most absurd task someone has asked if AI could do? And did you secretly want to try it anyway? So
I would say it kind of related to the name of my LLC, the AI Pope. They were basically like, hey, you should totally do like an AI confessional. Like, how do you think that would work in that space? And I absolutely thought it was ridiculous. And I was like, I don't know if like how much people would be willing to share, where their privacy, things along those lines. But secretly, like, yes, like I absolutely wanted to figure out like an AI Pope chatbot where like you go and confess your AI sins or the most ridiculous things that you've done, and it grants absolution or gives advice or feedback or
we actually had some guys on the podcast who are basically doing that. They have a essentially like a companion where you just tell it all of your deepest, darkest secrets in it. And one of the things we actually asked it to hit them to actually have it answer a question live on the show, and it just started talking about the guy's wife or something. I don't know. It's just like it was not necessarily the right question to ask. I didn't realize it until after. By the way, just because you're talking about the AI Pope, I just have to throw this up on the screen for a second. I just
Every single model wants to generate exactly that. Like anytime I'm doing any sort of branding work with it, I'm like, please no religious symbols, because like every time it makes a recommendation for me, it's like, here's a cross, here's you wearing the giant hat. Like it really leans hard into the it's just my last name. I'm clever.
It is an interesting point that you bring up, because one of the probably about a year ago I was at an event where the dean, actually he's now the dean of the business school at the University of Rochester, but at the time he was heading up essentially educational innovation, and one of the things that he was talking about was this idea of having students essentially creating a virtual TA, right? And this teaching assistant would, they could ask questions 24/7 about the course material, etc. They basically had uploaded the course material. And what he said was, what was interesting is that students were much more willing to ask what we'll call like the dumb questions of the AI. And then so what they had done is they had set it up so that the dumb questions that were being asked were getting fed back to the professor. So the professor would get a report saying, hey, this is this stuff that people are asking about. And the professor would then realize, oh, they don't understand this concept that I thought they understood. And so obviously your example of, confessional, but in some ways that's what that was, right? Is the students basically being like, I don't want to look like an idiot in class, but but I'm okay with looking like an idiot talking to ChatGPT because it's essentially anonymous and so forth. So I think
little did they know that ChatGPT is collecting. And I actually want to go back to this conversation, Nick, on the subject of AI confessional, but rather on the subject of data and privacy, right? Because you don't want your data to be fed to AI, especially when it comes to, Epstein files and that kind of stuff. But let's talk about data governance and the responsibility businesses have to take in taking their AI enterprise on this subject.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big concern for a lot of organizations out there, rightfully so, right? Like, so there's some high level things, right? Depending on your scale and what you've got going on and your comfort level with privacy. PII, confidential information, IP, things along those lines. A couple points I'll make quickly on that is right now, it's really not about trusting AI, just to make that abundantly clear. It's not like AI gets your information and they can just spit it out to someone. That's really not how it works. It's about the company that you're putting that information into, right? So do you trust OpenAI? And my counter is always, right now, you are trusting all of your confidential information with one of two companies. You're either trusting Microsoft or Google, right? So all of your trade secrets that are in your Gmail, your Outlook, or on your shared drives, right? So if you're in that space and you are very concerned, you can stick with Copilot inside of Microsoft. You can stick with Gemini. It's in the same sandbox. It's in the same trust tree. So it's not about AI getting it. It's really the company that you're looking for. Outside of that, you want to make sure that you anonymize any data that you might be plugging in. You want to make sure that you have good policies and make sure people understand what that is so they don't accidentally do it. It's one of the honestly big mistakes when I feel like people have too restrictive policies where it's very, you can only use this or you can't use this, or no, it's like it's only these two tools and that's it. All you're doing is creating more risk because people are just going to download it on their phone and you have no idea that they are doing that, and you're actually creating much bigger privacy and issues than you might think you are controlling with an overly rigid policy in that space. Outside of that, my third anecdote, while I don't include private information and everything like that, I am also very much in the vein that these things have already been taking our privacy since we started carrying them, right? And big data companies, you look at Facebook, Meta, whoever, how many lawsuits has Siri settled saying they totally aren't listening, but they totally are. So I really look about it as this is one of the first times in history where I have access to my data and I have access to all of these insights instead of just these big businesses. So I tend to be, I record everything that I can. I love transcriptions. I love pulling out insights from that. But yeah, as far as like the confessionals and deep dark secrets, that's probably the area where I still haven't even gone down that vein yet, just because where is that going to show up someday in some way, shape, or form? That seems like that's a human type thing to leave in that space.
I sometimes wonder though, like with the AI tools, it's like, if you put information, like proprietary information, let's say from your company, like I'm working on this new product, blah blah blah, and it was out there, and your competitors said like, well, what new product and ideas is I don't know, whatever the Hershey company working on today, like, would you believe that it got it right? Like, no. So even if it did say the thing that you were working on, how would I know that's sort of a little bit of a wacky way of thinking about it, but to some extent, like, I don't, there's so much uncertainty about what you get out of AI right now is your data is in some ways protected by the fact that like nobody knows whether AI is hallucinating.
There's trillions of data points and words that are brought into this. So like your string of 6 sentences, the probability that it pulls that out exactly, right? Like unless you've got some weird business model about like selling, freeze-dried hot dogs from the back of a truck that's actually in like this super hyper specific use case that no one's ever thought of before, and then someone asks for your business plan, like maybe, but like you'd still have to plug it into these systems just hundreds and thousands and millions of times for it to have any sort of correlation on how these are.
Well, and the concept that your idea is so unique and whatever is usually crap. It's almost always about the execution of it and your network and whatever. Like there are people with the exact same idea, and some of them get funded and some of them don't, and some of them actually go up and screw it up, and some of them don't. Like it's not as
it's funny as you're saying that. Elena will probably remember this, but when we in our Nabisco days, and this is generally true of CPG companies, is they don't accept, like if you call in on their call in line, or when nowadays would be send an email or chat or whatever it is, but back then there were still phones that people were using, but you would call in and say, I have a new product idea, and literally the reaction would be, we do not accept new product ideas, because we would occasionally have somebody be like, oh, you just launched mint and cream Oreo, I came up with mint and cream Oreo, and I'm going to sue you stealing my idea. And so we would just be like, no, we don't take any ideas, because to Eric, to that point, is like all of these ideas, every team that's ever been on Oreo has come up with the same 5 ideas, and they think that it's new. And if you go back, you'd go back into like the annals of concept history, and you'd be like, oh, somebody thought of this before. And so I think that's true. It's like the interesting question is not, can you come up with something that no one's ever thought of before, but can you think of a way of executing this idea nobody's ever been able to execute before? That's a different story. I agree with that point. So I think AI is actually uniquely suited to help us do that, because it is able to take information from so many different places and bring it together in unique ways, in ways that the human brain is not capable of, because we just can't carry that much information around with us.
So we are now at about 33 minutes and 30 seconds. So the half hour, as always, has flown by. But before we leave, what we like to always do is go around and have everybody say one thing that they want to leave our audience with. We always start with our guests, so you have no time to think about it. You just have to jump in with something. So, Nick, what is one thing that you would like to leave our audience with?
I would just say, for anyone that's watching this that feels overwhelmed by all of this, is you are not alone, right? Every single person feels overwhelmed, like they can't keep up with this technology. And I would just second that it is not a technological thing, right? Like it is conversational. If you can have a conversation with a human, you can use these type of tools. So finding the time to do that. My trick, 50-50 rule. If you do something and it saves you 2 hours, don't fill that 2 hours with more work. 1 hour goes back into work. Give yourself another hour to go experiment, to play, and you will not feel guilty about doing that. And that's how you can really snowball that. So find the time to not feel like you're wasting time by learning and experimenting.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. What's before I give my one thing, what's the best place for people to reach you or connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn constantly. Outside of that, I've got like a TikTok, but that's more just for fun. But LinkedIn, check out any of my websites with trainingyourlane.com or the AIPope.ai if you're a local New Hampshire business. But those are my general stomping grounds.
Absolutely. I guess I'm going to build on what you said and what we were talking about earlier, this idea that as companies think about how AI will be used going forward and how they can enhance their business, that they really should be thinking less about how do I replace people with AI and more, how do I create an enhanced workforce with this tool. I think we're going to see, like the example you gave, I think we're going to see companies getting rid of a bunch of people, and then I think in about 6 months or whatever, when hopefully the economy is a little more stable and whatever, people are going to be like, oh yeah, we probably need to hire stuff back. And I guess, fingers crossed that we don't end up in a recession in between that, but whatever. But anyway, I do think that there's a little bit of like a hype cycle of AI is going to replace all this stuff and cut all this cost out. And I think that the companies that are really going to take advantage of AI are not going to think of it that way. So I'll pass it over to Elena to give.
So on my end, I think I would second you, Nick, in the importance of learning. And the importance, so learning now has become probably the most important skill ahead of strategic thinking, ahead of creativity, ahead of execution. It's learning. How fast do you learn and adapt? And it's not the strongest survives, but the one most, able to change, right? So that motto is becoming even more prevalent now that the AI is here.
So I'm gonna end with a deep thought, because I put this down well back into the episode. I wrote the name Ford down, and what I meant by that was Henry Ford had some problems. I understand, some of his beliefs or whatever, but what he did do that was pretty interesting was that he understood that he had to pay his people enough so that they could buy his cars, right? Like that was sort of one of his major inventions, if you will. And I think we are going to potentially, AI could just fall flat on its face. Apparently a robot run by AI in Russia just fell flat on its face. I don't know if you saw that story, but anyway, it could fall flat on its face and continue to do so. But let's assume for a moment it doesn't. If it doesn't, we need to come up with a way for all of these companies that are, just their stock prices are skyrocketing and whatever. It's like, we're going to fire all these people because it's cheaper, whatever. But then it's like, but who is buying your Amazon stuff? Like, if nobody can afford to buy the stuff from Amazon, what are you going to have, like Elon ordering like trash bags off of Amazon for $4 million a bag or something? Like, what? It's not gonna, that doesn't work. That model ultimately is cannibalizing your own profits by maximizing your profits, which is a weird thing to say. So anyway, my point is, I think we need to channel Henry Ford's that innovation, maybe less so his some of his other behaviors that we need to maybe squeeze out. But in any case, just that's my deep thought for the episode. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. This was a very interesting conversation, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. Elena, thank you for keeping these two on track and asking some good, poignant questions. I definitely understand this dynamic a lot deeper now.
Yes.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Be well.
Bye.